Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call in, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Hour number one will be with Stephen Heuer. We're going to be talking about nutrition, detoxification. Hour number two will be, I'll be giving you some tips from my unpublished book. You can't buy it anywhere, but I'm sharing with this class things that I've learned over the past 68 years, things that work for us here at the Finelli family. And you might want to take away some of these tips to use in your life. Stephen Heuer is with us. Welcome, Stephen Heuer.
Good morning, Vincent. Nice to be with you again.
It's so good to hear your voice. Class, I met Stephen Heuer a number of years ago. He'd been to some of our Get Prepared Expos, and he came from the East Coast to the central part of the country, and we had a great time. And you will find that Stephen Heuer has a wealth of information. And just a little bit of the backstory. Stephen Heuer has had a number of health challenges, as have many. And he had been to the traditional system. He tried their way, and the results were lacking, to say the least. And what he has done is he has been on a quest to figure out how, who, what, when, where, why, and how regarding fixing his health. And that's what he does. So he has a company that will help you. And I buy products from Stephen. His company is Synergistic Nutrition. And he has a website. I'm going to let him give you the website because he has a couple of websites. Stephen, which website would you like our class to visit today if they choose to visit?
Yeah, Vincent, synergisticuniverse.com. I chose that URL because Synergistic Nutrition was taken and they wanted several $1,000s for that URL. So I just chose synergisticuniverse.com, spelled SYNERGISTIC, universe.com. We're going to have a new website in the not-too-distant future because this current one that I'm using, a Magento website, was built incorrectly, so it's caused us a lot of problems and a lot of cost to fix all the fixes that need fixing. So that new website will be up in the not-too-distant future, and then I'll have another URL that I'll give out when that time comes. But that is the current URL for our site.
Synergisticuniverse.com. And the phone number that you'd like us to use, Stephen, to contact you?
They can dial 888-988-3325, 888-988-3325. And they'll get a live person. They'll get me. I'm a one-man show these days, but I'm open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. If you want to talk, I'm happy to answer your questions, educate you, enlighten you on things that you may not know, and show you a pathway back to health.
Mm-hmm. And class, Stephen Heuer has helped me immensely, and he's made suggestions that, frankly, no one else has. And I followed them, and I've had positive results. So this is not a commercial. I am telling you that Stephen Heuer has really helped me from the minute I first met him. And I have to tell you, Stephen, I have never heard you or seen you hold back when someone asks you a question. You don't say, yeah, but you have to do all, you have to buy. You're willing to dispense information, and that's impressive.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
So Stephen, where would you like to start today?
I'd like to start by saying that I've had significant improvement with my hyperthyroid situation. I've had since 2016, I did a raw vegetarian diet that for some people, they thrive on it. But if your gut lacks certain bacteria, you don't break down the high amounts of calcium oxalate, and the calcium oxalate's like a microscopic razor blade. So, high amounts of green vegetable juice, high amounts of nuts, high amounts of nut milk, almond milk. Basically, I was drinking, microscopic razor blades that my gut couldn't break down, which led to microscopic holes in my digestive tract, also called the leaky gut. And when you start to absorb proteins undigested, your immune system is chronically looking at those foreign substances that have come through your intestinal wall into your bloodstream, as an offending, irritating substance. And so you create a state of chronic inflammation from your immune system attacking those foreign objects, which leads to or can lead to what's called autoimmunity of some particular part of your body where the immune system attacks that particular tissue. It could be your joints, it could be your skin, it could be, in my case, the thyroid. And so for 3.5+ years, I've had this enlarged, bulging thyroid on my right side of my neck, excess amounts of thyroid hormone production, which causes my heart to race and go into arrhythmia. Lost all my weight. I basically was 128 pounds, and I dropped down to as low as 99 pounds at one point. And recently, in the fall of this is the warm part of our fall here in South Carolina, I just had this remembrance of a supplement that was made, it's still made years ago, that they freeze dry basically a fertilized chicken egg that they let incubate for a certain number of days. And at that pre-embryonic state that they harvest the egg and freeze dry it, they've captured this chemical called the fibroblast growth factor. And it's supposed to help lower cortisol, help the adrenals, help with joint issues. So I took that supplement years ago, helped myself, a little bit, but after months of taking it, didn't notice anything, so I discontinued using it. So recently I thought to myself, what if it's just the quantity of this food and the chemicals in the food that's the issue, these pills not being enough, and perhaps getting my own eggs that are fertilized and incubating them for this specific number of days and then eating them, maybe that might help my health. So I did that, and interestingly, after I got these eggs and incubated them, and I didn't have a real incubator, but it still worked to do it in my dehydrator. I took them out, put them in the fridge, and then I ate a couple of them raw. And the very next day, the bowels moved really good. A problem I've had with this hyperthyroid is, loose stools, diarrhea, unformed stools, because you have too much thyroid hormone. It makes your transit time too fast. So all of a sudden, formed stools and really healthy bowel movement. And then second day, I did 2 eggs again, and the bump on my thyroid went away, and my thyroid hormone production went down. And so I've had the most improvement in my symptoms. I'm not 100%, I'm not out of the woods yet, but I've had the most improvement in my symptoms in these 3.5+ years just from eating raw on an empty stomach these incubated fertilized eggs. There's the fibroblast growth factor that's in the egg. I read up on this and found out that it directs stem cells in your body where to go to heal injured areas. So one of the reasons I didn't get any results with stem cell IVs that I got in Mexico a couple times years ago was because apparently I don't have enough of the chemical to direct those stem cells where to go to actually help heal something. So it's really quite a remarkable discovery, and I foresee that this will be something. I'm building a chicken coop right now. I'm going to have my own chickens in the not-too-distant future, my own egg production, and I'll supply people, a dozen eggs at a time if they want them in this particular, superfood format because it's quite a discovery.
Well, Stephen, I've got a comment about that. My grandfather was born in the late 1800s, and he fought in World War I, and he moved from Italy to the United States in the early 1900s, fought in World War I, and was gassed by our enemy in a gas warfare, a poisonous gas. And so he had some amazing challenges in his life. However, every day he would take a raw egg, and I saw him do this, and the first time I saw it, it was very interesting. He took a raw egg, and he took the point of a kitchen knife, we'll call it a steak knife, with that kind of a point, not a butter knife. And he would poke a little tiny hole in one end of the egg. And then he would poke a little hole in the other end. And then he'd put the egg the egg in its shell up to his mouth, and he would suck the egg right out of the hole in one end. Okay?
Yeah.
And he did that. He carefully picked out the little chips of eggshell, so he wasn't going to be eating those. And then he did that every morning. And so there's something to that and what you're talking about, because I saw how my grandfather was exposed to the horrors of war, was injured, and in this gas attack, he didn't have any holes in him, from projectiles or shrapnel, but he was gassed, and he lived into his 90s, and he did not retire. He was a hardworking farm-type guy, did not retire until his mid-80s.
Yeah, I got a story of somebody that was, had emphysema for, I guess, seven years or so, or several years anyways, and then she was on oxygen 24 hours a day. She was semi-bedridden. She was admitted to the hospital on a Thursday, and the doctor knew of this man that promoted a raw living foods diet with raw animal proteins and things, called him up, asked him for some advice, and so he said, well, all I could think of is to give her access to fresh raw eggs and let her consume as many of those as she wants throughout the weekend or wherever, throughout the next few days. So throughout the weekend, she consumed like 66 eggs raw, and on Monday, she was off the oxygen. She was walking around, had the most strength she'd had in years, and called up this guy that gave the advice for that, asking what's the next step. So, yeah, raw eggs are a blessing, and, the kind you want to get. If anybody out there is starting to get curious and interested in doing it themselves, they should get the pasture-raised chickens where they get access to insects, grass, dirt, and as well as a good feed, and then they'll produce the best egg possible.
We have chickens here at the farm, and they walk around the house all the time. And every animal on our farm has a job, and the chicken's job is to eat bugs, find little ticks, eat all the insects that we let them have, all the insects that they'd like to have, and they go looking for them. They love bugs, worms, grasshoppers. I mean, they like them all. And so they do a good job, and they produce eggs, and we eat the eggs. And the eggs don't look like the eggs that you buy at the store. The shells are different. They're brown, and it takes a while to get used to that. The brown egg. But then the yolk is much darker than the store-bought dozen eggs that you'll find at the supermarkets. And then what happens is you get used to them. And then when you go to the store and you look at the eggs, you go, what's wrong with these white eggs? And then if you crack one open, you go, how come the yolk isn't really yellow? What's wrong with these store-bought factory eggs? So, yes, there is something to it. We come back, Stephen, I've got a quick question for you before we go into the next part of this discussion, and that will be, what type of chickens do you recommend? Which ones have you selected, and why? Stephen Hewer's with us. And if you'd like to go to his website, synergisticuniverse.com. Stephen Hewer's with us, and let me give you his phone number, 888-988-3325, 888-988-3325, and he's in the Carolinas. Stephen, chickens, what are your choice? What kinds of chickens are you planning to raise? What breeds?
Right now, I have a few hatchlings from the neighbor farmer that I have, and 3 of them are black, 1 of them is white, and then I had another one that hatched out that was from somebody that supplies the Asian markets with 17-year-old fertilized incubated eggs, and I got a tray from him, and anyways, one of those hatched, and that's a golden chicken, and I think it's a meat bird because it's growing fast. It's growing much faster than the other ones. But I think I plan on getting the ones that'll lay Golden Comet or the Rhode Island Wren, the ones that lay the brown eggs, and they lay the maximum amount, like 250 to 280 eggs per year. And I chose that because I want, maximum high-quality egg production, basically.
Mm-hmm. What we've had here at the farm are Rhode Island Reds, Cinnamon Queen, and Barred Rock. So, and they all work fine. But they don't get along with each other. I mean, chickens are, I don't know, chickens
I noticed.
Seem to want to fight with each other. Yeah. So in our veranda right outside the kitchen door, I have a dog house that I've converted into a chicken house. And, it's freezing cold, and they won't let each other in this dog house. So I had to make an apartment in there so they have their own entrance. So, that way they'll get along. But that's something you might have to do. But it gets pretty cold here. We get down to close to zero at times, and it's rough on the chickens. So I sometimes have to escort them in and cover the entrance so that they stay warmer. But I think what you're saying is absolutely fascinating. Okay, where do you want to take it from here?
Well, I'd like to educate everyone out there that's listening to this show on the powers of non-denatured, never heated whey protein from grass-fed cows. It's pretty powerful. I continue to have, stellar results with customers, and it's just a superfood that people in general are not aware of, and they might categorize it with all other low-quality whey protein powders, and that's just something that everyone needs to be educated on, because it can really improve the quality of your life, the length of your life dramatically if you're consuming the whey protein powder that we work with on a daily basis.
Okay, so tell us what's the difference. I mean, you can go to the Chinese factory outlet and you can buy whey protein. You can go to the big box stores and you can buy whey protein. What's different?
The difference is most of the whey on the market comes from commercially raised, confined animal feeding operation, cows that are fed GMO corn, GMO soy, which has, of course, got glyphosate residues in it. And those cows get sick at a very early age. They have to be slaughtered at an early age because their meat quality goes down so low. And those toxins are transferred into the milk. So Francis Pottinger did studies on 900 cats back in the, I believe it was the 30s and 40s. Over the course of 10 years, he did this study on 900 cats, fed one group of cats raw milk, raw meat, another group cooked milk, cooked meat, another group raw milk, cooked meat, another group raw meat, cooked milk. And he noticed along the way that if the milk that was fed to the cats was from cows that had been feeding on agricultural waste products, it's a common practice to feed cows agricultural waste products. So that's like citrus peel cake, that's the peel of the citrus, beet pulp, grape skins, lots of different, basically, carbohydrate sources that they can digest but not get much nutrient from, and, hay, and that the animals would develop, the cows would develop very weak adrenal glands. And so, cows, they used to make adrenocortical extract from the adrenal glands of healthy cows to help people with anaphylactic shock or help people with low adrenal function, and work fine. But if they're fed this low-quality diet, the adrenals aren't strong enough to produce a quality adrenocortical extract. It doesn't work. The cats end up having deficiencies. They end up having small litters, problems with nursing, physical problems with their animals, just because they were fed milk from poorly fed cows.
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Stephen Heuer is with us, synergisticuniverse.com. Stephen, I don't do these practices, but I'll tell you what some other farmers have done. It wouldn't even occur to me to do these things. You're talking about what the animals that are used for food have been fed. Well, agricultural waste products fed to cows. On the East Coast, some farmers would feed chicken poop. Poop. Combined with shredded newspaper for bulk, because there's a little bit more protein in that chicken poop, then and we can get some use out of that. Well, they. I would never do that. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I've heard that.
You have heard that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's true. So we're talking about cats with some serious health problems. It sounds to me just like people. So
yeah,
people are
so
eating.
What ended up?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, it sounds like what I see around me. If I go to the Chinese factory outlet, I see all these people in poor health. You can tell they're in poor health because they're leaning on their shopping carts. They're using them as a walker, and these are people way younger than I am, and I'm not using those things. So they've put themselves in a terrible position by the inputs to their system. You put some bad gas in a car and it'll run lousy. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah, most people don't realize that the diet that they were raised on in the home, and 9 times out of 10 was not good. And so they just carry on the habits that they were raised with. And then it's hard to break those habits. And they don't connect the dots that, the way they've been eating for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 70 years is the cause of their cancer and their cardiovascular disease and their diabetes and arthritis and all these different degenerative conditions with different labels. So it's something that I've spent, my life as an adult studying, understanding. Basically, I understand what Hippocrates understood and taught is what I understand and teach. That disease is not, one specific part of the body that's at issue that you treat with, symptom-suppressing drugs. Instead, the body's a whole organism. Everything's connected one to another, and you have to encourage the body's own self-healing processes through different means to get it to detoxify itself, balance pH, repair different tissues, increase stem cell production, increase telomere length, whatever particular aspect of healing is needed. So the story that I was saying before the break with the cats, that I'll continue with now, was that they ended up, all the cats that got the raw diet, raw milk, raw meat, continued to live healthfully from generation to generation, no deformities, no issues whatsoever. The ones that got the cooked mixture, cooked and raw, like the raw milk and the cooked meat or the raw meat and the cooked milk, maintained some degree of health but weren't as healthy as the ones that got 100% raw. The ones that got 100% raw went sterile, 100% cooked milk, cooked meat, were sterile by the third generation. And by the second generation, there was deformities, smaller litters, and, you just proved that the quality of the milk and what you do to it to sterilize it determines whether it's going to be health-giving or not. So having said all that, the way that makes this product we carry, the Green Meadow Whey product, comes from Amish-raised grass-fed cows, and the inventor of this product, before he chose this particular grass-based dairy farmer, had grass specimens from a bunch of different dairy farms sent to him that he examined under the microscope for chloroplast content. So he found that this particular grass-based dairy farmer, Amish dairy farmer, had the highest chloroplast content of all the blades of grass that he had sent to him, of all the grass-based dairy farmers, which meant that the soil was the most fertile, because soil fertility would ensure that grass would produce higher protein, higher nutrient, higher chloroplast content. And so the milk is extremely nutrient dense, that is used to create the whey, and then all the other wheys on the market are heat sterilized, where they raise it to 161 degrees for 15 seconds, first as milk, then they make the cheese, and then the byproduct of making cheese is this liquid whey and the cheese, and the liquid whey is then sterilized again at 161 degrees for 15 seconds, and this is fully denaturing the protein. So the proteins are no longer functional. So whether it's lactoferrin, glycomacropeptide, immunoglobulins, they have no functionality that can benefit your body anymore. There are some amino acids that make up those proteins that can be broken down and utilized, but many of those amino acids have also become bent and twisted or denatured. So it doesn't matter if it says grass-fed whey, organic whey. Those are all fancy names and marketing terms to try and persuade you to think that this is a great product, when in reality it's been pasteurized at those temperatures, so it's become denatured. And so for people with any degree of intolerance to dairy or any degree of digestive weakness, those whey proteins tend to disturb them, tend to give them stomach upset, digestive upset of some kind. With Green Meadow Whey, our product is membrane filtered. It's not the byproduct of making cheese, so it's a sweet whey rather than an acid whey. And that whey is cold sterilized. So by law, you have to get rid of all the bacteria naturally in the milk or in the whey, and everybody does it with heat. I have this inventor friend that does it through cold methods that basically he's got a patent on. And so this preserves the amino acid and protein structure. So now you have functional immunoglobulins, functional lactoferrin, functional glycomacropeptide, functional amino acids. So you get virtually 99% utilization or absorption compared to a fraction of that with the cooked whey. There's also then a Tesla-like frequency science encoded into this whey, so that people need to understand that everything's frequency. So whether it's your plant, animal, rock, human body, foods, everything is a conglomeration of different frequencies, and those frequencies can be life-giving, or they can be neutral, or they can be disease-causing. So if you look at allopathic drug-based medicine, most of the patent medicine out there, all the patent medicine actually, pretty much is a frequency structure that was created in a laboratory that's toxic to the human body. It's supposed to control and create certain symptom benefits, but in reality, it's toxic, and there's always natural solutions. So these life-giving frequencies are put into this whey, so that now the whey, not only does it benefit you as it is a food source, but it's going to trigger your cells to produce more protein and more energy. So people that take it consistently report that they get this lift in their energy for 5 to 6 hours, and it's not an adrenal stimulation, Red Bull, caffeine, jitteriness. It's just a nice, clean, uplifting, good energy of both physical and mental, lifting. And then there's the detoxification. So whey can be extremely valuable to human health for its ability to support glutathione production. So whey happens to be nature's richest source of the sulfur amino acid called cysteine, and that cysteine is bound to another molecule of cysteine, so it's two molecules of cysteine called cysteine, and in that particular form, it passes, not only does it feed the intestinal lining, but it passes through the intestinal lining into the cells, where it breaks down to two molecules of cysteine, and thus fueling the creation of glutathione within the cell. So your liver needs lots of glutathione to help you detoxify all the toxins in our environment, the natural toxins from metabolizing foods, and your cells also need to be protected from these free radical toxins and to neutralize them. And so to feed your body daily a truly absorbable, non-denatured whey protein like ours, green meadow whey, fuels your intestinal lining, your liver, all the 37 or so trillion cells of your body with the ability to produce maximum optimized levels of glutathione. And that's really important, because now your cells can get rid of the inflammation or reduce it. They can detoxify toxins that have been there for years. Liver health can improve. I've had people tell me that they get all their aches and pains go away after like 30 days on the product. Some guys have told me they have an increase in their strength by 30 to 50%. So it's also nature's richest source of the branched chain amino acids, which are the three amino acids that fuel muscle growth: valine, leucine, and isoleucine. So it supports the muscle tissue repair. I've had invalids gain, 2 to 5 pounds of muscle over the course of a couple weeks on it. I've had people say that their chronic constipation's gone away, their heavy metal poisoning is cleared up. All kinds of amazing testimonies over several years that we've been carrying and selling this product. So I would just say to you, anybody out there using a protein powder, that's whether it's a pea protein powder, a rice protein powder, pasteurized whey protein powder, you're depriving yourself of the full benefits that you can get, because plant-based protein powders don't supply you the sulfur amino acids. They're not a complete protein. They can't fuel the glutathione production or muscle tissue repair significantly. And then the pasteurized whey products are a burden to people's bodies, where your liver and kidneys have to work overtime to detoxify what they can't use. You really have to give green meadow whey a try. It's amazing in what it can do for your health, and cumulatively you get stronger and more detoxified. You feel better and better. That you just can't put a price tag on. So that, in a nutshell, is the world's best whey protein powder that I consider, as a practitioner, front stage, center, top priority for people to consider using in their diet to keep their glutathione higher, their ability to detox faster than toxins come in, to neutralize inflammation, to support muscle tissue repair, to support liver health, and just, feeling good, basically.
Stephen, how do we consume it? It's a powder, comes in a very large container.
Yeah.
How is it consumed, and when, and with what other foods?
you can mix it with puree fruit in advance, or I like to puree fruit and throw a couple of eggs in it, and then mix it by hand the way into that smoothie you've created, because the proteins and the frequencies are fragile. So if you use a regular blender, high-speed blender, you can damage the whey proteins and also the frequency science that's in it. You can mix it with raw milk. I like to sweeten it with either maple syrup, honey, or coconut sugar. Coconut sugar doesn't mess with your blood sugar levels. You can, I guess, those are the two most common ways: raw milk and then fruit purees. And you can add the eggs to the fruit purees or not, like I do. And how do you use it? How do you mix it up, Vincent?
Well, Mrs. Finelli loves it, and what we do, she loves it as well. What we do is just in milk, just stir it in gently.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Finelli likes your whey products as a snack, or actually even a dessert.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I told Mrs. Finelli today, this morning, we were in the kitchen before the broadcast, and, she's 68 years old. She has the figure that is better than any actress I've seen on television. And they've been modified, the ones on television. They're painted up, and they do everything they can to hide the defects and improve whatever needs to be surgically improved, at least in their minds. And Mrs. Finelli looks better than all of them. And so it's a result of eating properly, avoiding bad things, moderation, but diet and exercise. That's what she does. And she's a really hard worker. So she doesn't, we kind of kid about, so what are you going to do today? Well, I'm going to eat bonbons. And it just doesn't happen. It's nothing like that at our farm. But no, that's what we do. That's how we take it. But so, Stephen, when we come back, we're going into another break. We're going into our last segment. Can you talk about what the experience of the detoxification process is? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? And the next question I have for you is, who are your customers? And not by name, but by what are they like in terms of health? And what do they expect from you? Class, let me give you Stephen Heuer's contact information. Telephone number, 888-988-3325. 888-988-3325. He's on the East Coast, so 10 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And website is Synergistic Universe, synergisticuniverse.com. And when you call, he'll answer the phone. Stephen, couple quick questions in the last segment. Detox process. What is it like? Is it going to be pleasant or unpleasant when you consume Green Meadow Whey?
99.9% of the time it's going to be pleasant, because when your liver is functioning correctly and optimally, those toxins that are being released from the tissues and getting into the lymph, then into the bloodstream, are going to be readily filtered out through the liver into the bile and not recirculate through the body, because basically negative detox symptoms occur because those toxins aren't exiting quick enough, and they're recirculating through your tissues, injuring tissues, causing inflammation, causing fevers and whatever. And so with improving liver function, you can overcome that. I've had one person in all these years have 2 weeks of detox symptoms, but on the other side of it, she felt really fantastic. But it's very rare that you actually have detox symptoms from the whey, because your liver is taking care of filtering out so well. Unlike other ways of doing it, where if you just chelate something out of the body with different methodologies that are out there, and you're just chelating it out of the tissues, the toxin, the heavy metal or whatever, then that toxin is not necessarily going to be filtered out by the liver, because you have an upregulated liver function. And so that's when you get negative detox symptoms.
And next question, Stephen Heuer, who are your customers? Not by name, but by description. What are their maladies, and what do they want to achieve, and what do they want from you?
So everybody out there, basically, from the people with cancer, to people with diabetes, people with kidney failure. I've had several people with kidney failure reverse and get off dialysis. I've had success with cancer. I have one guy that's a former movie star that, you know, he got better on the whey protein and gave me a great testimony. So whether you're, you know, the executive or whether you're the housewife, it just doesn't matter. Everybody's interested in health, and if they hear the message of what this product can do for them and it inspires them that they might benefit, they give me a call and they order the product and use it. And it helps with everything because, you know, the body is a whole system, and basically disease is a condition where there's toxicity, chronic inflammation, and the inability for the body to repair a specific tissue system. And this can help all that.
Stephen, could you react to this sentence, please? Cancer starts with inflammation.
Yes, it does, but the thing is that's a simplistic definition. Royal Rife, you know, he was the guy that discovered the viral component, and then another doctor discovered the fungal component. And people don't realize that virus and fungus grow right out of our tissues as a result of an unhealthy terrain. And then the toxins, they've also studied tumors and, you know, and analyzed them, and there's a concentration of heavy metals and other toxins in tumors. And so cancer occurs through a combination of things, toxicity, an acid pH. You know, it's known that once a cancer cell is deprived of oxygen, this was studies done by Otto Warburg, studies shown that if you deprive the healthy cells of oxygen for 48 hours, they become converted over to tumor cells permanently. And so pH controls oxygen. So if you end up having an acid pH in your body, you're going to have a low oxygen level, and you're going to create an environment where normal cells that run on oxygen are going to be forced to convert over to make energy without oxygen, which is an anaerobic cell, and that's also a tumor cell. And if your body has a strong immune system, your body will get rid of tumor cells as they occur. But as soon as you get older and your immune system starts to fall off, those tumors can start to grow, and you have to intervene with, you know, known natural remedies. I mean, I have a report called the Cancer Report, Freedom from Cancer for Everyone, which goes through the A to Z on how to basically give your body the best opportunity to heal completely. And that's what I did when I had cancer. And I did that last summer with a guy that got rid of his bone cancer in 3 months. And so, yeah, it works.
Stephen, diseases of those who are getting older, of course, we all are, but, you know, I'm 68. What would I see if I had not tried your Green Meadow Whey product? What would I see trying
basically,
it for the first 2 weeks?
Toxicity. Your cells are making energy all the time, and as a result of energy creation, there's acid byproducts. Lactic acid is one of them, and those acids have to be filtered out of the body in a 24-hour period. Once your glutathione levels drop off, the natural metabolic waste metabolism of the cell doesn't exit the body necessarily 100% in 24 hours. So these little bits of, you get rid of 95% of it, so 5% of it starts to accumulate in the tissue. And same with environmental toxins. You know, and then there's, you know, electromagnetic pollution that you're exposed to that makes the cells not function correctly temporarily as well. And so there's these toxins that start to build up cumulatively in the tissues that you're not taking the time to allow the body to get rid of. And that leads to the chronic inflammation, and then leads to the cancer and the cardiovascular disease and the diabetes and things.
Yeah. Stephen, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being with us today. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. This hour we'll talk about some tips from the book and the way I do things here at the farm. You know, it's during the breaks I get some of farm work done, and I just came back from feeding the chickens. And it really is, it's a wonderful thing having chickens. You know, they eat the bugs, as we talked about with Stephen Heuer. And they're wonderful to watch. I mean, they're so busy all the time. I mean, they're just looking for things to eat. And if you have them for a while, you can train them. And I train them to come when I call them. I say, choop, choop, and that's all I have to do. No matter where they are, they could be 300 feet away, and they come running. And I don't have to call them a bunch of times. I just call them once. And they know. They know that there's something good at the end of that call. I feed them, and they let me go near them, and I can pick them up and carry them around and give them a hug, and it's kind of neat. So you can do that too. All right, so let's talk about receptacles. I mentioned to a number of our instructors, and I have even mentioned it on the air, that I have yet to see a house that's wired properly, at least according to the way I would wire it. Shortcuts are taken, and one of the shortcuts that I absolutely do not like, and I've mentioned this before, there's a reason why I'm mentioning it again. It's a common problem. And receptacles have typically 2 brass screws on one side and 2 silver-colored screws on the other side, and 1 green screw for grounds. And it's I don't know why people do this, but I guess maybe it's faster. But people who wire houses will take, if you have, let's say, 5 receptacles on a circuit, they will wire the receptacles using the 5 screws. They'll put the incoming black wire on 1 brass screw, the outgoing black wire on the other brass screw, the incoming white wire on the silver-colored screw, and the outgoing white wire on the silver-colored screw, and then they'll tie the grounds together. But what they do is they generally, at least in my experience, they don't use a wire nut on the ground. They just take the ground wires and twist them together and put one of the twisted wires on the green screw. It's unacceptable because of corrosion and oxidation, and you are absolutely positively dependent on that ground wire for your computer running stably. You know, you can have all kinds of weird things happen if you don't have a good ground. But the problem is you won't know unless you test each individual receptacle with a receptacle tester, and you can buy that for about $5. And I suggest you consider doing that. Now, the risky part comes in if you choose to do the next step, which is actually take the cover plate off and make sure you shut off the breaker before you do that, and make sure that you know that breaker's shut off, because you can plug in the device to each of the parts of the receptacle that will take a plug, because you can actually wire a receptacle such that the bottom receptacle is powered differently from the top one. So even though one of them might be off, the other one might be on. That's not a common case, but the example of that is if you have a light that's powered by a light switch on the wall. You flip the switch and the table lamp comes on, for example. But yet the other part of that receptacle you could have on all the time. So you need to make sure you get the right circuit shut off when you test this. But what I'm saying is that's the wrong way, according to me, to wire an outlet. What I would do is twist those 2 black wires together. Of course, you have to strip the wires, and put a pigtail of about 8 inches on that wire, and use a wire nut and tighten it tightly. And that way, you will not have downstream problems with that receptacle. That pigtail, the black pigtail, would go to the 1 brass screw tightly wrapped around the screw, and the white pigtail would go to the silver-colored screw. And then the ground wires would be, those 2 wires would be wire nutted together with a pigtail that's a ground wire. That way, you have a really good connection. And so the downstream outlets are not affected by a loose wire on one of those screws. So why am I repeating this? Because I was asked to go to one of our instructors' houses and help him with his wiring. And he told me what the symptom was. His ceiling fan didn't work, and the downstream outlets didn't work, and the light switches didn't work. And he wanted to know what the problem was. And I said, well, I think it's one of those screws on the receptacle, probably one of the first receptacles in the series, in the string of Romex cable, has come loose. And I was almost right. Because what happened was the guy who wired that receptacle didn't strip off enough of the insulation. And because he didn't strip off enough of the insulation, he put the plastic insulation under part of the screw on the receptacle. And by doing that, the screw wasn't tight enough. So it would work sometimes and not most of the time. Now, that can cause a really serious problem called an arc fault, ARC. You've seen arc welders? You know, that bright electrical corona, so hot that you can melt steel with it. So think about that. If you have an arc fault at the junction of a receptacle screw and the Romex wire, you can burn your house down. Literally. Now, they make arc fault breakers, but, you know, they're expensive. And so do you take all your breakers out and replace them with arc fault breakers? I'm not going to recommend or not recommend. I'm not going to say do it or not do it. But I am going to say it's a possibility. But you can prevent a lot of that, almost all of it, in my opinion, by using the correct method of attaching the copper wire from Romex around the screw and tightening the screw securely with a flat blade screwdriver. Not a Phillips screwdriver, because you can't get enough torque on the screw. But there's always a risk that you're going to poke that flat blade screwdriver right through your hand if you slip. So I suggest you position that receptacle on something stable, or use a thick glove, maybe a leather glove, so if you do slip, you're not going to injure yourself, or take other precautions as you see fit. The bottom line is, when you're wiring a switch or a receptacle, in my opinion, absolutely, positively do not use those push-in connectors on the back of the device, meaning you can just strip the wire and stick it in without wrapping it around a screw. I think it's a crazy way of doing it. You don't have enough surface area, you don't have enough contact in order to, surface contact, in order to have good conduction of electricity. Okay? So those are a couple of the thoughts that I have about that. And you might want to test all the outlets in your home to make sure you have a good ground. And if you don't, you can get the Black & Decker book on how to wire receptacles and switches and so forth. But even that book will show you that, hey, yeah, you can stick the wire right into the back of that device, the receptacle or the switch, and just poke it in there, and spring tension will secure it. Well, I guess it passes Underwriters Laboratory standards, but it doesn't pass mine. And the other thing is, you always wrap the copper wire around the screw in the direction that you're going to tighten the screw. And what I saw, I couldn't believe. So a guy who claimed he was an electrician wrapped the wire the wrong way. So what happens is, if you wrap the wire clockwise around the screw, when you tighten the screw, you tighten the wire, and you don't unwrap the wire from the screw. If you make the loop the wrong way, you will loosen it when you're tightening the screw. That's crazy. But yet, I saw it. I saw firsthand. One side of the receptacle was wired correctly. The other side, the wires were wrapped the wrong way. And that was the outlet that had the failure. So I just wanted to share that. Next thing, toilets. I've gotten a number of calls from instructors over the years about their toilets leaking. Why do toilets leak? Well, I'm talking about leaking from the wax seal at the base of the toilet. I'm not talking about the supply line. I'm talking about the wax seal. So that when you flush the toilet, liquid comes out. Usually comes out either into the basement, or it comes out on the floor under the toilet, where the toilet meets the floor. The porcelain toilet meets the floor. Why is that? It's usually the same cause every time. Because whoever installed the toilet did not secure the toilet to the floor. There's several ways of doing that. When a toilet is installed, typically, there is a ring that has slots in it. And usually brass bolts are fitted into this ring. And the toilet is then bolted to the ring, which is the sewer pipe. And what happens is, a lot of those rings are made out of plastic. And if you tighten them too much, you break the plastic ring under the toilet. Now you have a huge problem. Replacing that is pretty difficult. You might need some special tools, an inside pipe cutter to do that, and a special flange. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to over-tighten it. But you do want to make that that bolt and nut that's on either side or each side of the toilet tight enough so that the toilet doesn't rock. Then what you do is once you get that secure and you test it and make sure it doesn't leak, then you caulk the base of the toilet. Now, some people think that you should not caulk the toilet. Well, there's a really good reason why you should. And the reason is simple. If the surface of the toilet and if the surface of the floor were perfectly flat, smooth, you wouldn't have too many problems. But that's never the case. If your toilet is mounted on a concrete floor, the floor is not smooth. If the toilet is mounted on a wood subfloor, with maybe vinyl on it or ceramic tile, it's not smooth. So what really happens is that toilet is sitting on a few points, a few high points of the floor in the toilet. And the toilet will rock. And if it rocks, the wax seal will leak. It's a certainty. So to prevent that, you tighten appropriately those nuts on those brass bolts so that the toilet is secure to the flange underneath the toilet, and then you caulk around the base of the toilet so that there's a larger, much, much larger surface contact area of the toilet to the caulk and the caulk to the floor. And if you do it that way, you're pretty much guaranteed of never having a leak. And that's the way we do it, right here at the farm. When we come back, I'll talk about what do you do if you want to add oil to your engine and you don't have a funnel? Or what's the best funnel to have? Can you make your own funnel? And then I'll tell you about compressors, the difference between oiled compressors and oil-less compressors, and how to make your tools last longer, and a lot more. Okay, some more tips from the book. Many years ago, I was on the road, and I needed to pour some oil into the engine. It was a long trip. And, if you look under the hood a lot of vehicles, you kind of have to wonder who designed that spot where the oil fill is on the engine. And a lot of Chevrolet trucks, you can't reach it. It's like so far back and so far up and back, you just can't reach it. And the hole is so small that you're likely to spill oil if you don't have a funnel. So I decided that I would take an empty but clean oil bottle, those plastic oil bottles. And I had the cap on it. It was clean, but it was I used the contents of it. Had a couple drops in it. And I took my Gerber serrated knife and I cut the bottom off of this little oil container. And then I took the cap off. I put the oil container, the quart bottle, in the oil fill, and I used it as a funnel. And it worked perfectly. So whenever I fill an engine with oil, I always pull the dipstick out a little bit so that air can escape easily so that I don't bubble out oil, if it goes in too fast. So that's one thing you can do. You just pull the dipstick out, but just remember to put it back in before you drive away. So I used a clean but used normally discarded type oil bottle as a funnel. Now, what do you do next? Because that's going to have oil in it and it can attract dust. So what I do with all of them, I have them on the bench and I put them in Ziploc baggies, the freezer type, the heavier ones. So that is my funnel, and it's better than any funnel you can buy, way better. So I just wanted to share that thought with you, that you can make your own funnel if you have to, and that funnel is really better than any funnel that I've ever used. But you have to hold it so it doesn't jump out of some of the fills, some of the fill openings on some of the engine. Steve Elkins, welcome.
Hey there, Vincent. How you doing? I've got this image in my head of you reaching down and hugging your chicken.
Yeah.
I want a picture of that. I'll put that on my computer for wallpaper. That would be a cool picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I just say choop choop, and they come running.
Yeah, they do. They're amazing. They're amazing. Hey, I just wanted to give a plug, if I may, for a guest I'm going to have on my program, Off the Beaten Path on RBN, which is every Sunday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've got a guest on the 22nd. I just wanted to throw by your listening audience, because I think a lot of your listening audience is kind of my listening audience. People want to be informed and educated. But I've got a guest. Her name is Orleen Kurla. Now, she's the California state president for Eagle Forum, and also an author, and very, very much out there as far as being an activist, political activist, for the right side, of course. And we're going to be discussing Agenda 2030, Agenda 21. We're going to be discussing ICLEI, which is Governments for Sustainability. It's the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. We're going to be talking about the 2017 fires in Northern California, and the most recent fires in 2019 in Northern California and Southern California, and what's the new developments, what we found out, the truth, not what has been spun and told on mainstream media. And I just wanted to let your listeners know that if they want to tune in, that's December 22nd, Off the Beaten Path, with myself, Steve Elkins, and my special guest, Orleen Kurla, on the 22nd of December.
Okay. And I want to thank you for inviting me to be with you last night on RBN, Public Broadcasting, talking about automatic transmissions and automotive preparedness. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. It was. I feel like I was with Click and Clack. A flashback from the NPR days of listening to Click and Clack. I got my own right here. Vincent Finelli, the guy we can't stump. I can't seem to stump you on anything.
You know, it was interesting that we got so many callers last night this was between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m., so if you want to listen to that broadcast class, you can go to republicbroadcasting.org and go to the archives for the National Intel Report, John Statmo's broadcast. And we got so many wonderful compliments. I couldn't believe they were talking about us. Hey, Steve, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye. Next on the list is air compressors. I bought my first air compressor from Sears Roebuck and Company back around 1971. It's a 240-volt model, 20-gallon tank, so it's 48 years old. And I bought one with a cast iron pump, meaning it's just like an automobile engine, single cylinder or two cylinder. This one happens to be 2 cylinders. And it has a cast iron pump, and it has a piston with rings, and the cylinder is cast iron, just like an automobile engine. And it has a crankcase and a lubrication system that would splash oil onto the cylinder walls, the piston rings, the connecting rod, crankshaft, all of it. And it has lasted since 1971. It's pretty impressive. I think it was $129.95 back then. And if I wanted to sell it today, I could sell it for easily, probably more than I paid for it. Okay? But I still have it. It's 20 gallons. It works fine. Now, the next compressor that I bought was when we were building this house. And I wanted to have a compressor that had enough reserve capacity, meaning enough compressed air in a tank, that I could use a nail gun, a framing nail gun. So, bang, bang, bang with the framing nail gun uses a lot of compressed air. So I bought one that was a 240 volt again. It's a vertical tank instead of one on wheels. It's a vertical tank, and it sits in one place. And you can bolt it to the floor if you want. I just have ours setting on rubber shock absorbers, rubber cushions, heavy rubber cushions, kind of like a tread cut out of a tire, like that. And it's a 2-cylinder. It's got a cast iron pump, cast iron cylinder, and it has a splash lubrication system, has a crankcase with oil in it. Now, if you contrast that, and it works fine, no failures of any kind. And so that's over 15 years old. If you contrast that to what you might get at the Chinese factory tool outlet or some other tool resellers, you'll find that you can get an oiled version or an oil-free. If you want one that will last a lot longer, you need to get the kind that is lubricated with oil. If you don't really care about how long it's going to last, you can get the oilless. The oilless are really loud, annoyingly loud. So loud, you're going to want it to be way away from you if you're using one. Now, the only oilless compressor that we have, I bought it on Craigslist. I think it was $30. And the only reason I bought it was so that if I have a flat tire 3/4 of a mile away from, the garage here at the farm, I can bring this little compressor out there, hook it up to an inverter, and in 20 minutes or so, I can inflate a tire because it's small and it's weak and it won't last very long. It's made by Campbell Hospital, I believe. Now, how long will they last? At the most, 2,000 hours. So if you use it every day, you might get 18 months out of it. That's disposable, right? Now, if you look at the oil type, 15,000 hours, or about 7x in terms of life expectancy. And the oil type is way quieter, way more durable, more expensive, will certainly last longer, and it's the way to go, in my opinion. So if you want longevity, forget the oilless compressors. I have a pretty low opinion of them. I know someone who has one, and it is so loud and vibrates so much, you can't stand to use it. And I'm not exaggerating. So there you have it about compressors. And, there's some brands that, like Husky, are okay. Even not Harbor Freight, Lowe's. I bought ours from Lowe's because at the time I had a 10% discount, and it was $500, 10% off. And when they rang it up, they made a mistake, so they took 10% off and tried to fix it, and they took another 10% off. And then, the assistant manager came over and tried to fix that. And by the time they were done fixing my 10% off, I got the $500 compressor for $350. And they gave up. They said, look, we can't fix this error on this cash register. Just please take it for $350. I was delighted to do that. I was willing to pay the regular price for it because it is that good. So that's what I have. Now make sure that your compressor has a heat exchanger on it to cool off the compressed air coming right out of the compressor because it'll be really, really hot. So look at that and make sure, in my opinion, if you're following my suggestion, you get one that is an oil type that has an oil lubrication system. Okay, next thing. So yesterday, at a shipment of used tools I bought, I wanted to buy some tools that were vintage. I don't like some of these new tools. I think they're pretty poor in terms of construction, in terms of sizing. So some of these Chi-Com wrenches aren't accurate in their size, and I think they're seconds, meaning, we can sell them to a homeowner. They won't know the difference because they don't fit the nuts and bolts properly because they're out of spec. So I wanted to buy some used quality tools, and I did. I found a guy on the internet who was selling some pliers, and I wanted very specific pliers. I wanted them to be the ones that the Bell system, meaning Bell Telephone, supplied their technicians with. And I'm talking about, in the 70s. And there was a guy who was selling, a lot of them. And so I bought the whole lot. And he was willing to come down in price. And I bought them for less than the cost of new pliers. And then the new pliers would be the Chi-Coms, right? So these are much heavier. They'll last much longer. They're made by companies called Utica, Crescent, so diagonal cutters, also known as dikes, and telephone needle nose pliers for the telephone wiring, which are the kind that I use for wiring electrical sockets and receptacles and home and farm wiring. But they had a lot of grime on the plastic dipped handles, and they've been sitting around for quite a while. So I wanted to clean them off. So how do you do that? Well, we just drained a transmission on a vehicle, and so I had a bucket of, when I say bucket, like a Rubbermaid bucket that's graduated so you can measure how much fluid is in it. It held like a couple gallons. And I just dipped the pliers, put some rubber gloves on. And you can get those at the Chinese factory tool outlet, the blue rubber gloves for working on auto mechanics. And I dipped them into, most of the way, but not completely, into this bucket of used automatic transmission fluid. And I opened and closed the pliers a whole bunch of times. And within, 30 seconds, these grimy, grungy pliers operated better and better and better. And so then I turned them over and I dipped the handles in. And then I put them in a can to let them, kind of drip the excess oil off. And then I took a shop cloth using these latex gloves, and I wiped the handles. Now, they don't look exactly brand new, but they look a lot better. They're a lot cleaner, and a lot of the grime and grunge is off them, and they operate really well. So now I have a set of vintage tools that are in pretty darn good condition at about the same price as the cheap, junky Chicom inferior, mismatched noses on the pliers. So these actually, when you close the pliers, the points actually line up because they're the best America ever made. So if you want to get a set, they are marked Bell System, Bell Space System, as in Bell Laboratories or the Bell System, the telephone company. We have some gear wrenches. Some of them are from the Chinese factory tool outlet. Some of them are Gear Wrench brand gear wrenches. And I want them to last longer too. So I had a bunch of those, metric and SAE. So what do? Well, I've got that bucket of ATF, automatic transmission fluid. I dip the gear end side into the bucket, spin it around, spin the wrench around, dip it in again, and then lie it flat so that the excess oil will drip onto some cardboard. You can do that as well. And it works great. So I always wipe off the tools. And I don't mind a very light coat of oil. I have the same tools, the same Craftsman, the SK Wayne, the Husky. I have the tools, the Proto, the Mac, from the 1960s and 1970s. I still have my tools. Of course, I add more and more and more tools, but I still have the old ones because I don't lose them. I remember where I put them. I don't leave them outside, and I wipe them off when I'm done. And if you dip your ratchet head into ATF, and it can be used ATF, let it settle for a couple of days, let the heavy particles settle to the bottom of the container, dip the ratchet head in it, spin it around. But, you don't want to get this oil on your hands because it's a known carcinogen. And ATF really, really works well. Okay, so I like, in terms of the best value in ratchet wrenches, I don't particularly like all of the Craftsman. I only like fine-tooth ratchets. I don't like the one where you have to rotate the ratchet handle a lot of degrees in order to make it click. I want a fine-tooth ratchet. So I don't like all of the old Craftsman. Some of them are okay, but I only like the fine-tooth versions. And Husky makes a really good, for a vintage ratchet, I'm talking about the 70s, excellent. SK Wayne, excellent. And for spark plugs, I like the flex head ratchet. And the one I like is stamped either SK Wayne or Husky or Champion, as in Champion spark plug. So there was a tool company that made them for the Champion spark plug company. It's marked Champion, and they work really well. So I like the flex head ratchets, but I don't like the ones with the bent handle. I like the straight handle. And you get a little more leverage because the flex head ratchets are a little longer. I don't like what I see in the new Chicom flex head ratchets. Okay. I'm just looking here, trying to read my own writing. Oh, telephones. If you have one of those cordless telephones, I'm not talking about a cell phone. I'm talking about one of those, they're marked AT&T or VTech, the Chinese factory outlet sells them. Sam's Club sells them. You get them on the internet. If you have one of those telephones that you can hit the button and put on speakerphone and walk around with it around your house without wires, well, of course, there's electromagnetic radiation in the microwave band, but if you have a power failure, that darn thing isn't going to work, because the base station that's connected to the landline is powered by a transformer that's plugged into your wall outlet. So when the power fails, that darn thing isn't going to work. Even if you have a full charge on the handset, it's not going to work. So what do? Well, you hook it up to your computer, UPS, uninterruptible power, and then it will work. We'll be right back. So, class, if you want to see the condition of the water that you're drinking, if you lift up the lid on the toilet tank where you're living, your home, your apartment, you'll get a chance to see what's growing in that toilet tank. So if you have a municipal water supply, you'll probably find that toilet tank looks really clean inside and there's nothing growing, no black gooey stuff, no green gooey stuff, no biologicals living in there because of the chlorine that's killed it all. But if you have a well, you might find that the toilet tank has turned black on the inside. And that kind of tells you that there's some biological life inside that toilet tank. So what do? Well, you can shock the well. Now, I want you to do your research before you believe anything I say on this broadcast. But I'll tell you what we do. If you have a well, you typically have a cap on the well, and it has maybe 5, 6, 7 bolts. They're usually stainless steel. You loosen them with a 7/16 wrench and socket. And when you take the well cap off, you'll see some wires in there, and those are the wires that go down to the well pump, which is typically at the bottom of the well. Sometimes well pumps are, inside the basement, but most of the time today they're at the bottom of the well. And when you take that off, you get a chance to see what the well casing looks like, the wiring and so forth. So what you do is, or what I do, I'm not telling you what to do, I'll just tell you what I do. What I do is I will take a very clean bucket of water, drinkable water, water that I wouldn't mind drinking out of a bucket that I wouldn't mind drinking out of as well. Okay, so it's a clean bucket beforehand, it's all clean, and I'll fill it with, let's say, 3-4 gallons of water. And I will take some chlorine bleach, plain chlorine bleach, not scented, not lemon scented or fresh scent or whatever they sell, just the plain old chlorine bleach. And I'll pour about 1/2 gallon down the well. And then I'll put the cap on the chlorine bottle, and I will then rinse the well casing and the wiring that I poured chlorine on with that bucket of water. And then I'll put the cap on with the same bolts and gasket that I removed. Then I'll go in the house, and if I have a water softener, I'll let the water softener stay in line, and I'll let this chlorinated water come from the well and go into the water softener. I'll turn on the hot water, turn on the cold water, and I will then, when I smell the chlorine smell coming out of each faucet, I then shut it off. Hot water, cold water at each location. Bathtub, shower, toilet, every bit of it. And I'll let the chlorine sit in the water to disinfect the pipes. And then, after an hour or so, I will then flush all the pipes. And so you just turn on the water and flush the pipes until that chlorine smell goes away. Then it's probably safe to drink. But you do not want to drink that chlorinated water. You don't want to get it on your hands. It's poisonous. But it'll kill the biologicals in your well. Now, you may have to run a garden hose to get the rest of the water out of your plumbing, flush the well. So what happens is that chlorine goes into the well, into that underground reservoir, and it will disinfect the water all around your well, including your well plumbing. And it works great. But make sure that you're careful and you don't drink the chlorinated water because it's deadly. Now, the professionals don't do it that way. They do everything the same, except they don't use liquid chlorine. They'll just throw a tablet in there. You don't need to buy that tablet. You can buy the gallon jug of house brand chlorine. Just do not get the scented kind. Toilet plumbing. We talked about the leaks. Well, sometimes you have to replace the supply line. And that's the line that comes out of the wall, it's usually thin, and goes into the toilet tank. And sometimes they fail. Now, there's lots of ways of replacing that. You can get these fancy types that they sell at the big box stores in the plumbing department. They would be the kind that are clear or white, and you'll see a fabric reinforcing nylon or rayon or polyester fabric in there, kind of a cross weave. You can get the kind that has a stainless steel braid on the outside. I don't like any of those. I only like the kind that is a thin gray plastic that is semi-flexible. You can bed into shape, and it'll sort of stay in that shape. And it costs 1/5 the price. And it will last decades. And the reason I like it is it's a smaller tube. And so why would I want less flow to the toilet? Well, unless you have an assembly line going on in your house, and you need to be able to flush and next, flush, and then next, and then flush. Unless you've got that going on, you'd be better off with a slower flow of water refilling the toilet tank, because then you'd be less likely to be scalded when you're in the shower and somebody flushes the toilet somewhere else in the house. So you really don't need that high-speed, high-volume, high-flow toilet supply line. So those are a few of the tips, and I think I'll do this every Friday, or if an instructor can't make it, I'll just keep going down the list of the topics in the book. Unless, of course, you think that I shouldn't. And if you think I shouldn't, somehow figure out how to let me know, and I'll stop. Thanks so much for being in class.